and Beezie and I are all back to present the thesis of the first two antinomies. So the thesis positions in all of the antinomies are from the point of view of people that Kant would call the dogmatic metaphysicians. So these are folks like Leibniz, also like Wolff, who you might not have read. You might not have heard of Wolff before, but he would count as one of those as well. And you might be familiar from previous philosophy classes of what some of those different kinds of views are. So when he's arguing for the thesis, he's arguing basically in their voice. So these are not arguments that he himself endorses. He spends the rest of the antinomies telling us why he thinks they're wrong. But for now, he's saying, here's how these arguments run. So the reason why he chooses these positions is because he thinks that these are things that people are engaged in debates about. Okay, so the first of the antinomies says that the world has a beginning in time and is enclosed in boundaries in space. This is the thesis position. And he argues for this. In fact, he argues for a lot of the antinomies using a proof by contradiction structure. So if you think back to your introductory logic classes, you might be familiar with a proof by contradiction in which you will suppose the opposite of what it is you want to prove and show that that leads to some kind of absurd position. So in this case, Kant says, okay, suppose that the world has no beginning in time. Well, what would that mean? That would mean that at every single moment in time, there would have already have been an infinity of moments. And the situation that he might be thinking of there is, suppose you walked into a room and you saw someone standing there and they were just counting down like 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay, thank goodness that's done. And you said, oh, what was going on? What were you doing? Where did you start counting from? And they said, I didn't start counting. I've always been counting, and I just managed to finish now. You would say that's kind of ridiculous. There's no way that could happen, right? So by definition, you can't finish going through an infinity of things. And if at every moment an infinity had already elapsed, then we would have had to have completed infinitely many moments already, right now. So we think that's an absurdity. And something somewhat similar happens if we think of the idea of space being unbounded, because that would mean that there are infinitely many spaces existing all together, all at once. Okay? And he says on behalf of the dogmatic metaphysician, although my dogmatic metaphysician seems to have fallen asleep, that that also wouldn't be possible. Okay, so that's the first thesis. The second thesis will also have a similar kind of argument structure. And so this one says that every substance in the world consists of simple parts. So you might be familiar with discussions and arguments of monads. And that's kind of the similar sort of idea. And the proof by contradiction there goes by him saying, okay, so suppose that substances don't consist of simple parts. Well, then remove all the composition in thought and you would be left with nothing. Okay, so keep dividing up everything and you're not left with anything. So since there's no simple parts, there's no endpoint, so remove all the composition and there's no object left, right? You thought you had a substance, a composite substance at least, and then you kept removing the composition, and then you had nothing. So there have to be some simple parts as the endpoints for that composition.